Got some sneaky ARCs to talk to you about today. Dark bleatings, everybody! Now, you know I don't normally do dedicated book reviews. That's a bit fewer and farther between on the channel. Fewer and further between on the channel. I tend to do lists of what I've been reading this week, blah, 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 blah. However, I have two ARCs that I'm dying to talk to you about that are coming out in the next couple of months. So, I have Eric LaRocca's First in the Burnt Sparrow series. I hear this is going to be a series. We Are Always Tender with Our Dead. Thank you very much, Titan, for sending this to me. And I also have Secret Lives of the Dead by Lebbon. Thank you very much, Tim, for giving this to me. I'm really excited. As you all might know, I have talked about Tim quite a lot on this channel, and I recently realised when I wrote my review for the website of this book that he is the most reviewed author on my website. I have reviewed 16 of his books on the website, and that's not to mention the books I read of his before I, started running Happy Goat Horror. We've got two completely different books. Eric, I'm a newer fan of in recent years. I have spoken to both of these authors, not about these particular books, but I did get the opportunity to interview them both separately, so I will link those in the description if you're interested in my chat with Eric or Tim. Both wonderful people. Let's talk about Secret Lives of the Dead first. So let me check the date. This is coming out on the 26th of August in the UK, and I'm sure if it's not the same date, I'm sure it won't be far elsewhere as well. So Lebbon is the author of some of my favourites, including The Silence, The Hunt, Among the Living. That was a really great one as well, and I'm a huge fan. And this book has done nothing to shake my unwavering fandom and loyalty. So what's it about, I might hear you ask? So we have our main character Jodie, her boyfriend, and a mutual friend of theirs, the three of them together. They decide that they are going to basically rob this derelict house. They've heard there's stuff up there, no one lives there, they're not going to be harming anybody, they're just going to go in, quick in and out, grab a few things, hopefully to sell on. However, when they get there, these reviews will be spoiler free, by the way. So, however, when they get there, it turns out that they're not the only people who are turning up to this house, and this is apparently just a random house with maybe some random artifacts or, antiques that maybe they can sell. But yes, someone else is there, and there is another twist in the tale that Jodie knows this guy, and she is very aware of the danger her group are in because of this guy's arrival. And then from there we have this whole sort of very fast-paced, it takes place over one day, sort of struggle and a race against time and a race against each other between Jodie and this other guy whose name is Lem. So okay, this I would describe, so you all know I love folk horror. I would actually describe this book as a folk thriller because it has a lot of thriller elements. In my written review, I wrote that it reminded me the most of The Hunt, which is Tim's book about a guy who's basically forced to run. I think he's on, what's it called? Snowdon? Oh my gosh, I'm an idiot today. That big pointy mountain in North Wales. So he's basically forced to go on the run for the amusement of rich people. It's a really fast-paced story, and this one stylistically reminded me of that because we're taking place over such a short time frame of a day, and because we've got this race against each other kind of thing going on as well, and the stakes are super high. So Jodie, it has been for her life trying to get to the bottom of a mystery concerning somebody that she deeply loves, and then this guy Lem I was not expecting a backstory. This guy is a piece of work. We've got no doubt that he'd be happy to kill somebody at the drop of a hat to get what he wants. He and Jodie both want the same thing. I can't talk too much about that without actually ruining the plot of the book, because it was really fun to discover what the plot was as we went along. But yeah, I wasn't expecting backstory for Lem. Oh my god! I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I wasn't expecting backstory for Lem, but it really illuminated what was going on for Jodie as well. I thought it was going to just be how he got into crime and things like that, but Lem's backstory is very deep, and there were some things he saw that are informing his character now and that make us quite afraid for Jodie. So yeah, the two stories converging is really good, and perhaps they were in each other's lives before. Plot, but we're all heading towards a focal point here. So things that I really loved about the book, the pacing. Tim is excellent with pacing. His pacing always reflects what's going on narratively, so you know, when we need time to breathe a little bit and explore a character a bit further, he'll slow down a little, but when we're in a story that's where everything is a rush, that's reflected in the pacing as well. So it's like a really quick read. I read it in 2 sittings, and it was only 2 sittings and not 1 because I had to go to sleep for the night. So it was such a page turner. I loved the horror mix with the thriller style. That's how I'd say it. It's like a horror story but written like a thriller. I think that Tim excels in both aspects. He's really good at bringing in creepy elements, and this is folky. This is a folky story, and I love folk horror. There is nothing creepier or more unsettling to me than either actual magic that's rooted in really dark, weird stuff, or people responding to magic as if it's real, and it's like irrelevant if it is, because we're looking at a group of people. But this is definitely more in the mystical, supernatural side of folk horror, which I really love. I would have loved a bit more of that, although that's not really a criticism of the book. I would just love to see more. If Tim wanted to write some sort of prequel or even a follow-up, I would love to read it. A prequel maybe though, because the folky elements that he brings in are so interesting and weird. I'd just love to see more of it. But I absolutely loved it as it was, and I would wholeheartedly recommend it. And this is something I always end up mentioning when I talk about Tim's books, is his ability to use locations almost as secondary characters. I think that he really excelled in this in Among the Living. I think that's the best I've ever seen him do it, with a landscape where the landscape felt like an antagonist and it almost felt sentient because of the way he was describing it. Not so much in here because we're moving around so much. However, when they first get to the house in the beginning that they're going to rob, I could really see that house and the landscape around it and the nighttime, and I for the life of me can't figure out how Tim so vividly paints his locations, because he's not overly like wordy or sort of like flamboyant with his language or anything. As you all know, I'm an Adam Neville fan. Adam Neville is very wordy, too wordy for some people, but not for me. And I'm someone who doesn't really like literary horror, as they call it. I'm not a fan of like purple prose, but I just don't think Adam falls into that category because the way he describes things is so creative. I feel like Tim is somewhere between Stephen King, who doesn't tend to describe locations much at all. He'll tell you a prison, you picture a prison, boom, done, and he'll focus on other stuff. But I feel like Tim is somewhere between Stephen King and Adam Neville for description, because somehow he manages to like really conjure this imagery for me, and I can really feel it. Like I can feel the cold of the night, and I can, you know, like smell like the rotting wood of like an old disused house and things like that. But he hasn't like really delved into those descriptions, so I'm not sure how he's doing this, perhaps some sort of wizardry. But anyway, yes, in my written review I put that this was a 4 out of 5, and I gave it 4 out of 5 on Amazon and Goodreads as well, but I think I'm gonna go and change it to 5 out of 5. I was judging it against the Silence and Among the Living, which initially I thought I preferred those books over this one, and I don't tend to grade Tim's books in the grand scheme of all the books I read. Like, he's kind of in his own category, and I kind of like score his books against his other works, which is probably unfair and annoying because it's like he's one of my favourite writers, so I kind of hold him to a higher standard or something. But I think I'm gonna have to go change it to a 5 because I really don't have criticisms of it. It's a really, really fun time. So yes, if you're somebody who enjoys like the mystery of the horror elements and quick pacing, a quick read, and a lot of action to go with your horror and your spooky, creepy things, this is probably something that you would love. So as I said, out on the 26th of August. Changing gears for something entirely different from Tim's book, but I love Eric. I really love Eric. We Are Always Tender with Our Dead, We Are Always Tender with Our Dead, out on the 9th of September. In the UK, it might be coming out earlier or later. I'm assuming the same time though in America and elsewhere. So if you haven't read Eric LaRocca, his brand of horror, he's more extreme, although I didn't even realise he was extreme horror or classed as extreme horror, typically speaking, when I first read him, because his books are so emotional for me and I don't tend to associate that with extreme horror. I felt the same about Exquisite Corpse by Poppy C. Bright. I did not realise that was an extreme horror book, or even that category of horror existed at the time that I read it, because it was a tearjerker for me. It made me very stressed, anxious and sad, which great book, honestly, but it is savage. If you haven't read it, don't go into it thinking it's going to be like a la-di-da time. It's really, really heavy. But Eric, what do I want to say about Eric's typical writing style? I see a lot of people in other reviews talking about how people who aren't a fan of his work would describe him as like trauma porn, which I disagree with. I just think that he's really honest about people and the darker side, like the more negative emotions and experiences that we have emotionally, and I really appreciate him for that, because it's quite hard to be honest about how trauma affects you as an author, because presumably you have to have some experience with trauma to be able to convey this respectfully and convincingly. So I really respect that. I don't know anything about Eric's life and I hope that he's good, but like I just have a lot of respect for him for having the balls to go there, because he does go to some really dark places. In terms of, if you've read Eric before, in terms of like the extreme subject matter that he tends to cover, like I wouldn't say that Eric writes a lot of scenes of just really gratuitous human physical suffering or anything like that, but he does delve into very extreme topics mentally. So like the kind of stuff that most people would shy away from reading. In the grand scheme of all of Eric's work, I would say that his themes are heavy, but they're not in the same ballpark as something like At Dark I Become Loathsome. He's gone like lighter on some of those elements, but they're there, but there's like suggestions of things rather than fully going into everything, if that makes sense. So I personally found this a lighter read, but it's still very heavy. So what's it about? Okay, so in the beginning of the book, a huge massacre happens, and it's just a terrible tragedy, and loads of people are dead in this town, and they catch the culprits immediately. And the weird thing about them is, firstly, they're a family, so they're a mother, father and teenage child, and then the weirder thing about them is that they are completely faceless, so they're like human in form, you can tell mum, dad, son, but they have no facial features, kind of just like a little slit to breathe through, I guess. So no eyes, no nose, really, no mouth. And that was so compelling as a starting place for a book, because I was just so curious about where these people came from and what they are, if they're people, why they did what they did and everything. And the faceless aspect of these murderers got more and more thought-provoking for me as the book went on. So our main character is a teenage boy who does not have a good relationship with his dad, and his mum is gone, and he's gay, and I don't actually remember if his dad knew that and didn't accept it, or if he just knew his dad wouldn't accept it, so he hasn't told him, and it's like an elephant in the room kind of situation. But so we're dealing with that, but that's kind of like a second layer of stuff. That's not like the main thing. And it's really about how this boy is responding to everything that's going on. So the faceless family, the town elders, and that's another thing, I wasn't sure what time frame we were in. It's kind of ambiguous, which I really liked. The faceless people are punished by the town elders with this decision that the people affected by the massacre can go and do whatever they want to these people. So they kind of give the family to this guy to keep in his basement, to one of the elders. He keeps them in this basement, and then anyone can come in and do whatever they want to them. So they can torture them, they can do whatever. We don't see scenes of this really, but it's not really graphic, but we just know that this is going on. And the guy who's housing them is quite obsessed with this. He's very interested in their limits, if they can be hurt, how much they can be hurt, how quickly they heal. So they're definitely not your regular people, obviously, outside of the faceless thing. They're healing fast. He's not sure how much pain they're experiencing, although he knows they're experiencing pain. And our main boy ends up, for horrible reasons, going to live with this guy, and he's kind of grooming him to follow suit. I can't say much more about the story without going into massive spoiler territory, but this boy's life emotionally has been really hard, and I can't go into like the brain science of this. I'm not a doctor or a scientist myself, but I do know that when young people experience trauma, I think that it rewires some responses going forward in your brain, because your brain is still developing, and trauma does have a very I want to say physical effect on your brain. Like, it does change things for you, so that you don't have a typical mindset as you're growing up if you had a healthy childhood or whatever. So I think that that's what Eric was going for here, is like the things that form you as you're growing up, and it's things that are completely out of your control, things you shouldn't know about, things you shouldn't be seeing, things you shouldn't be experiencing. And it's very it's heavy for an adult to carry this stuff, never mind a still developing teenager. For me, there was like a lot going on in this book, like thematically. Like, the main story is quite straightforward actually, but thematically there's so much going on and so much to think about that I still am thinking about it. I read it a few weeks ago now, and I really loved it, and the more I think about it, the more I love it. I feel like this story opened up an area of empathy for me that I didn't have, and I don't know how I feel about it. So this faceless family, I keep going back to this because this was such an interesting thing to do with these murderers, because I kept wondering why Eric made that decision, why he didn't just have just some guy or some, you know, what you'd picture someone who's capable of a massacre to look like and behave like. But these people can't speak, so they can't communicate why they did this. Not that there would be a justifiable reason in any universe I can imagine for doing something so heinous, but because they're presented as a family, it does keep reminding you over and over and over again that they're people, and that, you know, like regular people do these kinds of things, or well, not regular people, but people who seem regular to everybody else. And then this aspect of the punishment, initially I was like, yeah, that's fair, because if somebody I loved got killed in a massacre, I would want free reign to take my revenge on these people. But then when I actually think about it, I don't think I could go and inflict torture and pain on someone, even someone like that. There are people in the book that want to, you know, they turn up in this basement to torture these people, and then they change their minds once they get there, and it becomes very real. And I think what I got from this is, I think that Eric made them faceless because we tend to automatically strip people of any personality or anything, like any empathy towards them once they commit crimes like this. And I'm not saying that that's wrong or right. Like, I have a really hard time feeling sorry at all for people who, for example, hurt children. I think that, like, they deserve whatever the full extent of the law I think they deserve. And I've been really unsympathetic if I've learned that those types of people have a really rough time in prison and things. I just don't give a single shit about it if they're in there because they've done something horrible like that. But this book made me think about, like, how long should somebody be punished for something? How much should they be punished for something? What would you consider an excessive punishment for any crime? Should people suffer forever for something they've done? And it just made me uncomfortable with myself, because I had to start thinking about how I think about these kinds of things. And I'm uncomfortable either way I look at it. Like, if I think that somebody at some point should be done with their punishment now, depending on the crime, I feel uncomfortable with thinking that. But then also I feel uncomfortable with thinking that people should just have horrible stuff inflicted on them forever. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's and I think that these are things that are worth thinking about, but I don't have an answer for it at the moment. I'm still kind of going through it. But yeah, the point is that when people commit these kinds of crimes, they suddenly do become quite faceless to us as a society. You hear that somebody's committed a bunch of murders or something, and then you switch off, like, you just switch off towards them as a human. You think they deserve whatever they're going to get now. I think that that's what Eric was going for, but he was trying to show us what that actually looks like. And the main theme that I picked up here, and it's not like a really subtle theme, but it's something that, again, I think it's quite layered because I keep thinking about it, is that this story feels like it's about thresholds to me. So we have a really interesting other scene as well that's literally about doorway thresholds, and I'll leave that for you to discover for yourself. That was incredible. But yeah, we have like these physical thresholds, like doorways you can't cross over and whatever. And then we've got these like emotional thresholds, like if you're going to torture this family, how much you're going to do to them, and what's the limit, and why are you doing it? And the other question I kept asking myself was, like, once you've crossed a threshold, any kind of threshold, like, what's on the other side of it? Like, what does that look like? And I think for me, a lot of this book was about that, is like, what do you look like, or what do you turn into, or do you change at all if you cross one of your own kind of thresholds? So yeah, sorry, I know I'm being a bit like ambiguous and a bit like not very specific with exactly what I'm talking about here, but again, no spoilers. But yeah, if you want something that's really thought-provoking, that could potentially make you a bit uncomfortable as you ask yourself questions that this book is going to pose to you, with really, really weird horror elements and a crazy hook from the beginning, and a character that you can really get behind, this is a book you probably love. It's you know, it's got some heavy subject matter. Like I said, it doesn't dwell too much on specific things, but we're given to understand our character better because of the things they're experiencing. But yeah, it's just like, it's just such an unusual story, and I love to be surprised by how weird a story is. I read a lot, as you know, a lot of horror. I'm very really like surprised by a plot, delighted by plots all the time, but I'm very really surprised by something like really new, and this felt really fresh and unique to me. So, two completely different books, I would say for different readers, but I'm one reader and I absolutely love both of them. I love quite a lot of types of horror. So yes, if you like fast-paced, really good mix of action and horror, very compelling plot driving the protagonist, and a really, really horrible antagonist that you should be scared of, with your cool little folk horror elements and some weird folky history and curse, this is a book you will probably love. If you want really emotional, weird, strange and uncomfortable, but in a really good way, this is a book you'll probably love. I love both of them. Secret Lives of the Dead by Tim Lebbon is out on the 26th of August, and just checking my dates, We Are Always Tender with Our Dead, the first in the Burnt Sparrow series by LaRocca, is out on the 9th of September. I wholeheartedly recommend both of them. They are both 5 out of 5 books for me. I hope that I've given you something to look forward to here. Let me know if any of you have already pre-ordered these and you're looking forward to them. I will see you in the next video. Bleed!